And welcome to another episode of Living with FASD, informational and human interest show for those affected by prenatal alcohol exposure, their loved ones, and anyone wanting to learn more. Brought to you by someone with both professional and living experience with FASD. This morning, I want to welcome to the mic Dr. Christie Petrenko. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It is my honor and pleasure. If you would be so kind as to let the audience know, who you are, your background, what brought you to the work of FASD, and where you're doing all the wonderful things you're doing.
Well, that could take an hour itself right there, but I'll keep it succinct and then we can always go
Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version first. So I'm Christie Petrenko. I'm a research associate professor and clinical psychologist at Mount Hope Family Center at the University of Rochester. And I have been working in the space of FASD since about 2003, which is like mind-boggling. That's 20 years now.
Yeah.
And I started as a graduate student out at San Diego, working with Ed Riley and Sarah Matson, who've been real leaders in the field, and have taken my own little path and journey on the career. But I have yet to meet too many people who had a real clear linear path to find FASD, and mine was not either. So
Yeah.
It's always kind of interesting how you fall into it and then you find your space and your people and you're like, this is what I really want to do. So happy to talk more about that if you're interested. But
yeah, it seems like there are certain topics, once you learn them, there's no unlearning it, right? And FASD is one of those. And the more you learn about it, it just grabs you.
yeah. So when I first came into learning about FASD, I actually applied to grad school to work with autism because that's what I had experience with as an undergrad student in Ohio. And I just happened to get the attention of Ed Riley because not that many people apply to work and study FASD, right?
Yeah.
So he always looks in the autism box. And he reached out and he's like, well, anything you want to study with autism, you can do in FASD and more. So he had me hooked. And you also don't turn down an interview for grad school.
Right.
So, but as I learned about FASD, it kind of picked the nerdy little researcher in me and got interested in this area. But it also really drew the social justice aspect and my passion for health equity and really taking what I learned, with my little nerdy research hat and my numbers and, my research designs, but finding ways to make that applicable to folks in ways that can, really improve quality of life. So that kind of blend really spoke to me. And then it's taken me in like really interesting ways like app development and policy and documentaries and books. And so for someone who loves to learn and create, it just has been a path that I've really enjoyed so far. And I'm sure will take me in some other wild ways as we go forward.
Yeah. And I do want to talk about your book, but since we're on the topic of research, I have a theory, and it's going to need someone to investigate. So, like so many people, I was totally shocked by some of the findings in the survey that the ALC Changemakers did. The one that really grabbed me and wouldn't let go was early onset dementia, right? The risk being 206-fold the general population. That's mind-boggling. It's how do you even wrap your head around that? And it's a bit of a worry for me on a personal level because I'm full-time caring for my mom who has Lewy body.
Yeah.
And with type 1 diabetes, I'm predisposed already to Alzheimer's. So even though I've passed the early part, pretty much, because, I'm 60. So I only have a few more years to get an early diagnosis, and I'm not there. cognitively, I'm not there. So I think I escaped that, but it really got me thinking, Christy, that what might be causing that, right? So I happened to stumble upon this idea. I don't know if it has any merit or not, and I have no idea how anyone would research it to figure out if it's a fit or not. But I'm curious if the vehicle for that, you know, early the early diagnosis for pretty severe brain disease might be in the fact that a lot of folks with FASD have trouble tracking the passage of time. And if you can't timestamp something, it doesn't get properly filed away in memory.
Yeah, I
That's
think we're there's so many questions that we need answered, and I know
yeah.
many adults with FASD are really wondering and need information to help them
Mhm.
make decisions about their health. And
Yeah.
I just was so thrilled. And knowing many of the ALC members, that they took it upon themselves when they
Yeah.
weren't getting the answers they needed from researchers to do the
Yeah.
research themselves. They're very
Yeah.
capable researchers, and
Yeah.
the study of really getting peers to, and they 500 or more people to
Mhm.
report on their health. Like as a researcher, I like
Yeah.
get
How did
salivated
they
for
get
having,
that? Right?
getting that kind of data to answer important questions. And
Yeah.
so, I think that has been a really valuable source of just drawing attention to, wow, we all have a lot of health issues
Yeah.
that are earlier than most people would suspect, and that we aren't always believed. And what does this mean? And why do we have these health issues? And so
Yeah.
there's that really inspired a lot of research right now in the field. Looking
Hang
at,
on for me 1 second. I'm going to pause this and go shut up my dog.
oh, I can't hear it at all.
Oh, you
So,
can't?
mm-mm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still going to do it because he's driving me nuts.
Okay.
I'll be right back. Sorry. I expected to see a strange cat in the patio or something. Didn't see anything. Oh, what
Well,
are you going to do?
yeah. Well, I think we were talking about adults and sort of your
Yeah.
wonderings about
Yeah.
dementia risk and things like that. And I just was following up saying that our, having multiple different kinds of research helping to answer this question. I know that there
Mm-hmm.
has been some of the longitudinal studies, which means studies that have been following people
Right.
since they were born, that were funded in the late 70s and early 80s and had really clear, careful information about prenatal alcohol exposure in people's lives over time, including the experiences of trauma and other adversities that people
Yeah.
have that can also impact health. And so some of those studies are now following up people who are now my age in their 40s,
Mm-hmm.
um, and looking to see about whether they're also seeing in these cohorts high rates of health.
Yeah.
And importantly, we're also looking at basic research with animal models and molecular models to test some of
Mm-hmm.
those specific um, mechanisms and processes to really learn more. But we're
Yeah.
still very early to know the
Yeah.
answer to some of these questions. But
Yeah.
I think it's important that people are wondering about these things and asking them, because they're really
Yeah.
important things for people to know about their health
Yeah.
and how they can support themselves.
I was reading an article yesterday on LinkedIn has the most wonderful articles. But I was reading one that was saying it was tying the aging process and how things become more and more rapid the older we get to the mitochondrial um, the function of the mitochondria in the gut, I'm guessing, and what they called KT cells or killer T
Killer T
cells.
cells. Yeah,
Yeah, and that got me wondering, wow, I wonder if that's another vehicle, because one of the other things that the ALC found in their survey was that a lot of us are impacted at earlier ages by things that are typically seen in older adults.
mhm.
And I was just like, another interesting study. but I'm not into, I am a nerd, but I'm not in research.
Well, we all have our skills and passions, right? And so I
Yeah.
think there's no shortage, but one of the things that our team here at Rochester has been trying to advocate for and encourage others is it's so important to have folks with living experience as part of our research teams, not just somebody who's a token member who we occasionally ask things, but like people who are helping form the questions, collect the data. And then once we have results, asking our people with living experience, what does this mean to you? What other things are you wondering about? Or are we making sense of this in a way that fits, And so I feel like just like we have statisticians on our team, and we need to have folks with living experience to help make sure we're asking the right questions that are important, and that we're making sense and using that valuable experience that people have. We all, so we're trying to find ways in some of our research to create those opportunities, as well as one of my graduate students took on a project with the ALC to understand what are the best practices for including community members with lived experience, and are working on a toolkit that'll hopefully come out in the next year to help other researchers who are newer in this space find ways to create those opportunities where people can meaningfully contribute.
So what are all the things that your team is into? I know there was an app.
We have several apps.
Okay.
Our team is really thinking from a systems level, and our overall goal is to think about access to care. And so when I say systems level, I'm talking about, different levels of services. So thinking about the medical system, the mental health system, the education system. We're starting to think about the justice system, child welfare. And then also, we all know the systems aren't very well suited and capable right now to serve people with FASD. So we're also thinking about what are ways we can go direct to people with FASD. So we're doing bits of things in all of those spaces. So I'll just start with some of our kind of direct to people, direct to users.
Okay.
And so we have developed 2 apps in that space, and we use a approach called a user-centered design approach when we're developing apps, which means that we involve stakeholders or community members that's relevant to. So our very first entry into this space was with what's called the Families Moving Forward Connect app. And so there's this wonderful program called Families Moving Forward, which my colleague Heather Olson developed about 15, 20 years ago at Seattle Children's Research Institute, University of Washington. And it's done by a therapist, and it's got great results. We've done it for years here at University of Rochester as well. But what we find is that there are only certain providers that have training in that, and many people can't access that in their communities.
Right.
So what we did is we created a derivative product from that standard therapist-led program, and we made it a self-directed app. So we were able to take a lot of the content and principles and methods, as well as develop new content and resources within the app. And we went through a very careful, systematic, nerdy way of developing and testing, but also best practices to make sure that what we were developing at each step, what do you think about the design? Okay, we designed it. Now we implement it. Now beta test it for us. Is it working? Is it, and then what else could we make it better? And so over about a 5-year process, we developed and tested that. And at the end of last year, we just finished a trial, and this year we were looking at the data. It showed that the app helped families. So these are caregivers of children ages 3 to 12. It helped them learn that important process of reframing and understanding their children's behavior from a brain-based disability perspective. It helped them feel more satisfied in their role as a parent. More family needs were met, and they also learned more about FASD, as you might expect. So we found a lot of success with that, and we had just a was a really wonderful project to kind of go through and learn that way. But we also recognize that FASD is a lifelong condition. And
Mhm.
if you think there is little for families, there's even less for adults.
Yeah.
So we did our next project called My Health Coach, which
Okay.
is an app for adults. And we've been developing that over the last 2.5 years as a partnership with the ALC
Mhm.
members.
I think that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, that was inspired by the caregiver app, and our partners at the ALC. And so that app, um, we did initial focus groups. Actually, the ALC led the focus groups with our research team, and that worked really well. We did an online survey and developed that. That research study has been submitted to a journal, and so hopefully that'll get accepted and be out there.
Mhm.
After we developed the app, we just finished testing it with about 40 adults with FASD.
Mhm.
And so we just completed that stage, and we're looking at all of our data, which
Mhm.
we had people do interviews with us after they tried the app out. And they also did some surveys. And what we found is that people, it was one, the app was feasible for people to use. They were able
Okay.
to install it and use it. People vary, of course, in how much they actually use the app, but um, some people used it quite a lot.
Mhm.
And we found that it was acceptable to users, that they liked it overall. They found some of the features
Yeah.
useful. But this was a beta test version. It wasn't a fully
Yeah.
designed, fully developed, because you want to make sure that the core pieces work
Yeah.
before you make it bigger, right?
Yeah.
So they gave us lots of great ideas of how to build out certain functions they liked a lot, that they found most useful, and some parts that were fine the way they were, that maybe met what the needs are. So we've been adding and making those refinements over the last few
Mhm.
months. And I think we're looking into early in 2024, or sometime maybe by the summer, of doing
Okay.
a much larger study where we're going to look to see how it works for people, like if how much it helps. So
Okay.
all the studies we've been doing so far on the adult app have been like, what do you think of it? Let's
Mhm.
see technologically, how does it work? How do we make it better? But none
Yeah.
of those studies were like, did it actually help people?
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
told us what they thought about that, but we didn't have like the key numbers that like policy people
Right.
need to know, okay, this is an effective
Yeah.
app.
So
And that's
what all does it track?
so what the app, the adult app has a chatbot
Mhm.
interface, which makes it a lot easier for users not having to navigate and find things in the app. So the chatbot
Okay.
can help do that. It does a daily check-in every day and asks how the person's mood is. It asks about any physical symptoms. It asks about how they slept, and it asks
Mhm.
about a positive activity they have planned for the day. So it does a little check-in,
Okay.
and based
Huh.
on what the user says, it might make recommendations in the app. It can also track symptoms that they have and organize them to share with providers later.
Mhm.
Another, probably the most popular feature of the app is a tracker tool. So you can set up trackers, can be things like to take medications at certain
Mhm.
times of the day. We've had some users who use it to remind them to eat. If they aren't great at tracking their
Yeah.
satiety, how hungry
Yeah.
they are. Um, we've had people, I think the average number of trackers people set up in the study was like 4, but some
Okay.
people had as many as 30 different trackers they
Oh
had
my
to
goodness.
day. So
That would give me cell phone burnout,
everybody's different, right? So
right?
some people maybe did 1 tracker or 0 trackers,
Yeah.
some people did 30,
Yeah.
but the average was about 4.
That is
Um,
pretty
and
cool.
and so then the tracker would send you a notification through your app reminders of certain things to do.
Mhm.
There were also basic fact sheets about what FASD is and what those symptoms might mean for people with FASD,
Yeah.
as well as there were fact sheets that people with FASD could give like their provider or an employer about it. And it was language that we really carefully crafted with the ALC to make sure it was strengths-based,
Yeah.
that it was accurate, that it was at a level that people could understand well, and in a way that helped them know what to do about it for their own bodies.
Yeah.
There were other things like we had relaxation audio clips. There was a strengths assessment that people really liked.
Okay.
Other kinds of things like that. And we're continuing to build those and make those more robust.
What an exciting
Yeah.
project.
So it's also been just a really fun project to work
Yeah,
on.
I'm sure.
So those are the kind of things that we have worked on, of like, okay, how do we get things on a big scale to people that are accessible? Now, is an
Yeah.
app gonna be the end all for people? No, but could it help and get you a little bit of,
Yeah.
improvement, or something to help you through your day?
Yeah.
And if it can do that for a lot of people, that actually has a pretty big impact.
Yeah.
But
And it
also,
can be that external brain, with all the trackers.
yeah, well, we all need accommodations and supports in life. The amount
Yeah.
and the degree to that varies by person and what
Yeah.
works for each person.
Yeah.
But it's, giving people some tools that are FASD informed.
Yeah.
So we have those sort of direct, but we also, at the same time, our team is trying to find scalable ways to make our workforce more competent on FASD. So a lot of those use technology to reach more people. So we have a new project that is working with mental health providers to help them learn how to identify and do
Yeah.
diagnosis in the mental health
Yeah.
system, which is possible,
Yeah.
and support families in using some of these app tools. So it doesn't
Yeah.
look like such a big ask for
Yeah.
providers who don't know anything. So
Yeah.
giving them some things to make it easy, and
Yeah.
then hopefully they're going to want to do more and become champions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're doing that with caregivers. I envision, as our adult app matures, well, they'll be like the next thing you do with that. And we also have, a study going on with teachers. We've been doing work on educating medical providers, especially our nurse practitioners, who I think are a really ideal model
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
providing care. And then our new justice project. So we're really trying to think.
What's your justice project about?
Well, one of my graduate students, she used to be what's called a CASA volunteer,
Oh,
so
yeah.
a court-appointed special advocate.
Yeah.
And she had some experience working with youth and families, and recognizing, because she's worked with me before graduate school for a couple of years too.
Yeah.
She had identified, some folks on her caseload that she thought probably had FASD. And so she brought it up to the teams and people involved, and kind of got shut down. And she's like, oh,
Yeah.
So one of the projects that she's really planning to develop as a student, as part of her work, is thinking about ways to leverage CASA volunteers and other people within the court system as ways of identifying and figuring out ways to coordinate care in that system.
I could use her where I live.
She's phenomenal. Her name is Emily Spybrook. So we have, a lot. Our team is growing and really thinking about how to get things implemented in systems. If you build it, they will come does not how things work and change. So
I wish that were true.
I wish I could just build stuff, throw it out there, and then.
Did you bring food?
Or
people, if you serve food, people will come.
Research, we're used to doing our studies, writing a paper, and then putting it out there and expecting that it's gonna go out into the world. And I don't know how many people read research papers, but they don't really, you have to really work and study. There's actually a whole field called implementation science, where it's thinking about how do we study what works to get people to take on new innovations and new ways of being. So that's a lot of what we try to do in our work.
Okay. That sounds so fascinating. You have a lot of things going on there. Wow.
Yeah.
What?
When do I sleep? I don't know.
I know that problem between my foster care social work job and my hospice chaplain job and podcast and the book, which thankfully is done, and and taking care of my mom full time. Yeah. Yeah. What is sleep anyway?
Yeah. Oh, I love sleeping, but you have to really be thoughtful about how to make it all work.
Right? Yeah. How to maximize it. Um, so out of all the things that you've done, what has you feeling the most satisfied? Speaking of sleep, if you're kicking back in bed and you're just reviewing things, ready to go to sleep, what brings the biggest smile to your face?
Um, I think, gosh, that is a great question. Um,
I try to ask those once in a while.
yeah, I think the things that really bring me the most joy are those projects that really integrate a lot of what I love about the field of FASD. So the things that, bring in the research and the theory and the cool design that, gets grants, the at the same time doing that where I'm creating and innovating something that is going to have a pretty immediate and impact with people.
Yeah.
The things that create opportunities for students and people with living experience. And so and that's something that's really working towards health equity. When I have a project that like hits all of those things together, I get really excited.
Yeah. And then sleep really goes out the window, huh?
Well, then I'm like, well, we've got it. So, and then I go to bed. So I think our newer kind of app projects that really work on a lot of those things, I think are some of my favorite.
Yeah, I saw the advertisement looking for guinea pigs for the adult app, and I just thought, ugh, I'm so on my health. I don't need that. But I had no idea how much it does. So yeah, that's kudos to everyone who had a piece of building that out to what
Well,
all it does.
and probably next summer, as we go to do the larger study, we're going to be looking for about 120 adults around the world who want to try it out and to see, and how these studies go in order to do these research studies, with the idea of getting like that data and those numbers that get policy people excited and get the research field excited to then want to make it available to people. You have to do these designs that are really careful and that, typically about half the people in the study get the app right away and try it out. And the other people are in like a wait group, which lets us see to make sure, like one of our app studies, COVID happened in the middle. Well, COVID affects us all, and it can impact people's health and stress in many ways. So you have to have a group that isn't getting the thing you're testing at the same time, just to make sure there's not other things happening in the world that could explain why people's health and behavior are different. So, but it's always important to me that our wait groups eventually get the thing as well, because I want them to have the opportunity to, we don't know for sure if it works, but we think it does. Otherwise, why would we have done it? So those are the kind of designs that, I know sometimes it can be disappointing to be in the wait group. But they're really helping make sure that we're doing the really strong research designs that will help us answer the question and get these things to people in the broad term. And hopefully we don't have to have them wait too long to try out the thing too, because we really want to hear their experience. And it's not the be all for everybody, but
so let's talk about criteria, since you're going to be looking for subjects to participate next summer. Do they have to have, what are all the qualifying parameters that you need? Do they have to have a formal diagnosis? And
Well,
if
yeah,
so, does it matter which one under that FASD umbrella?
yeah. Well, that's a great question. In many research studies, you really want to have a carefully identified group of people. But like, who are the people that are ultimately going to download this kind of app in an app store in the future? It's going to be people who, have a diagnosis, but it's also going to be people who don't, who think they do.
Yeah.
So it's this balance in research of like, who is going to be your end users? Um, who do we know has FASD? And it's figuring it out. So in our studies, we try to hit that balance by, for criteria, having people who have a diagnosis, that's clear. But then also people who know that they were prenatally alcohol exposed, but maybe haven't been able to get a diagnosis. Those would also be fine.
And that would be me, because I didn't have a clue until I was 56.
Yeah, and there are many reasons why people don't.
When I was becoming certified in the neurobehavioral model, which is very similar to families moving forward, I started recognizing all the primary characteristics. I'm like, ding, I was checking all these boxes. So I asked my mom, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I drank every day." Like, who doesn't?
And
But it was the 60s, right? So to me, I had enough of the characteristics that I recognized did impact the way my life went, with her confirmation, and it was good enough for me. Maybe eventually I'll go down that path of getting diagnosed, but for now it's about saving up for retirement because that's coming up awfully fast.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's usually how we've tried to balance that. And, there's folks who suspect it. They wouldn't be eligible for this study, but in the end, when it's out in the app stores, we recognize that many folks might do that too. And honestly, some of the features in the app would probably be useful from other groups of people beyond, like, one of the folks on our team has been always kind of wondered, like, as a caretaker of someone for dementia, like some of the app features might be really helpful for somebody, or the TBI or other types of things. But
I use the neurobehavioral model with my mom, just to keep me grounded and keep me from taking all her brain-based oddness personally.
It's understanding we all have different needs. So and then that's for that app. We've been able to enroll people all over the world who, I mean, the app is written in English at this point, and so folks who are able to read and understand English would be the criteria for that. But at some point, that app is pretty easy to translate. So
and that one's the caregiver app you're speaking of?
No, the caregiver app has been limited to the US right now, and that is just because systems, like school systems and things, differ by country. And so we really focused on developing that with the US system in mind, but that would eventually, when we're able to get that in the app stores, there are folks in other parts of the world who have expressed interest, and will explore opportunities to adapt that for other countries too.
So how close is the caregiver app to being available to my audience?
Yeah, that is a great question. And the only thing that is holding that back right now is getting all of the intellectual property licensing agreements across universities squared away. We've been working on that for a while. I hear we're close, but then it's just a matter of spinning that off into commercialization in an app store. So it could be a few months, it could be longer. It just depends on how these, institutional processes go.
And will there be a cost to that app?
There are some maintenance costs for apps, in terms of being able to keep, every time iOS or Android updates their operating system, we have to keep that going. We also have moderators in our forum within the caregiver app. And so it's important to us that those folks are compensated for their time. But we're talking about a pretty low cost app. We've been talking about the business plan and getting this available in app stores and what would be appropriate. There's the licensing model, which doesn't seem appropriate for this kind of app because that'll just encourage people to kind of push through it too quickly and not really
Yeah.
get a lot out of it. Um, but what we are looking at right now is thinking of it almost like what you would pay for a book, probably in
Okay.
the like $10 to $15 range. But
Okay.
it's like an interactive book, an
Uh-huh.
activity,
Uh-huh.
and forum. So it's kind of more than that, but that was likely going to be in the range of something that's accessible to many people,
Yeah.
um, but in a way that'll help keep things sustainable, which is our
Right.
goal.
Right.
So we're not looking to make like lots of money or anything on this kind of thing. We're just mainly looking to keep it sustainable for our
Yeah.
moderator and our
Yeah.
engineer, and also to add things as we go too. We want to keep it fresh and not
Mm-hmm.
stagnant.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So we only have about 10 minutes left. This is going to be airing Thanksgiving weekend. So tell me, Christie, as you think about your involvement in FASD for the last 20 years, what are you most thankful for at this point?
That's a great question. There a few things in particular I would say. As a professional, I've been so thankful for all the nurturing and mentorship I've gotten in this field. I think of just about any other field I've had experience with. I think the FASD space is particularly nurturing. We're not
Mhm.
very big, unfortunately, but we're very supportive of people coming up. I also am just really thankful for my community partners,
Mm.
the ALC, the families, the kids, the young people that partner with us, that share their
Mhm.
stories and their experience and helping us and working with us to make sure, the gifts and talents that our team has paired with their gifts and talents, I think
Yeah.
really together are really trying to make change and
Yeah.
on many levels. So I'd say those are
Okay.
the things that I'm most
Oh, and
thankful.
those are
The
wonderful things.
people, right? It's always the people.
Right? And I can't believe we're at Thanksgiving time already.
I
It
know.
just 2023 has just zoomed by. Um, but along with Thanksgiving comes thoughts about Christmas and Christmas
Uh,
shopping. So this is a good chance for us, Christie, to plug our books. Do you have yours handy? Can you hold it
Oh
up?
gosh, I don't know. I was not prepared with mine physically.
Oh,
I don't know where it went. My office is a space.
okay.
It's actually in my other office at home because I was
Gotcha.
reading it again I was looking at the intervention chapter again as I was preparing for a presentation.
Yeah. So everybody, Christie is a co-author,
Co-editor.
co-editor of a wonderful book, Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders, a multidisciplinary approach. It is on my wish list. And it's a collection of what research. Each chapter is different research projects, right?
Well, so what this book is
From
that,
from our fellow nerds.
yes, our fellow nerds, and they're wonderful. So my colleague
Yeah.
Omar Abdul Rahman and I curated articles, and we really thought of it from prenatal through the lifespan. And we thought through of
Yeah.
like, we organized the book and thinking about like, you know, the touch points that we have. So,
Yeah.
from preconception prevention, from, you know, secondary prevention, from, diagnosis, from neonatal care to education systems, to interventions, to child welfare, to health and,
Yeah.
and so on. And we really took a course and we reached out to like the top experts we knew in each area and asked
Mhm.
them to write a chapter that's accessible to people, to trainees, to
Yeah.
providers, to lay folks who like nerdy stuff, um, to write and put like an up to date on what do we know from the research and where is the field come from historically and where are we
Mhm.
going to
Yeah.
to create a way to bring people kind of up to date and get them thinking kind of in a systems way. So there's some really great stuff in there that really covers a wide range of
Yeah.
topics.
Yeah. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And so I like the fact that you said it's for lay people who are interested in nerdy stuff.
Mhm.
But I think everyone in the audience would be interested in this because it's our favorite subject.
Yeah.
We can't stop talking about it because it's so important that we educate, no matter who we are and no matter how we're involved, it's so important to educate others. And so it sounds like your book is the perfect way to get the most current knowledge about
Yeah,
what's
well,
going on.
we created a book that I would have wanted as like an early graduate student trying to be like, oh, I have
Yeah.
to interview for a lab in 2 weeks and I don't know anything about FASD, crash course, everything I need to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what we tried to create this book together.
Okay. And then for those of you who haven't seen mine, it's Sip by Sip Candid Conversations with people diagnosed with as adults with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So mine tells 10 stories, mine included, but the other 9 are in conversations. And so it's like the reader will be a fly on the wall, listening in, so to speak, on these conversations about people's journeys. And everybody that I interviewed in the book is so different. Their lives are different. Their diagnostic story is different. And what they're doing to move the FASD field forward is different and inspiring as well. So I kind of got the idea from my favorite book on trauma is Conversations with a Rattlesnake.
Oh.
And it was this thick, and I read it in 48 hours because I couldn't put it down. And that's what, come on, we might pretend that we're polite and don't want to eavesdrop, but who among us, and I'm asking all the audience too, doesn't eavesdrop when there's a really juicy conversation at the next table in a restaurant? We all do it. And it's a good way to keep people wanting to learn more. So that was the hope and the aim, that the 15 plus million adults walking around in this country who have no idea prenatal exposures behind their life struggles might get that missing piece of their puzzle and have an avenue to explore and make life smoother. So 2 very different books, 2 very great gifts. So Christie, I thank you so much for your time this morning. I know you have another meeting to get to, and I want to honor that. But I'm so appreciative that you came on air. I'd love to have you back sometime when you can update us on the research projects. And
Sure.
I think that would be great. And everybody, if you want to turn to your show notes, you're going to be able to get the link to Christie's book, to my book, to, I'll try and put a summary of information on the apps, and also how you can follow Christie on LinkedIn and Twitter. And have a great week. Don't forget to come back to the YouTube channel on Friday for your next Free Friday tidbit, and come back here again next Monday for the next episode of Living with FASD. And in the meantime, have a wonderful, blessed Thanksgiving and be safe, especially if you're traveling. Till next time, take care, everyone.